Colleagues, good evening. I hope you are all doing well. Good evening, colleagues. So we're just about to start. I hope you're doing well. Prof. Van Lille, can you show me a happy sign? It's a happy day today. So then please show me a happy sign. So they showed me it goes like this. All right, colleagues, so we're just running out of time. My name is Tankiso Muloi. I'm the Executive Dean of the College of Business and Economics. So I'll just establish the protocol that will be followed. So then firstly, introduce the Chief Operations Officer of the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Ralipat Amboti. Welcome, Doc. Thank you so much. So then we also have the panelists, Ms. Zoto Mabuza from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNICA, Zambia. We have the panelists, the Prof. Dr. Martijn Becker, Erasmus University, Rotterdam, Netherlands. Mr. Rashid Sidat, Gauteng City Region Observatory. Then the keynote speakers online, we have John Helliwell, the Professor Emeritus of Economics, University of British Columbia. Then we also have the second keynote speaker, Prof. Talita Greileng. Thank you so much, Prof, for bringing the World Happiness Report launch to the University of Johannesburg. This is a great day, a happy day for UJ, a happy day for South Africa, a happy day for Africa. So then Prof. Erika Kramembula, the moderator, the SACHI chair. So in the School of Economics, the College of Business and Economics at the great and the mighty University of Johannesburg. Dr. Martijn Hendricks, Erasmus, University of Rotterdam, Netherlands, you're welcome to South Africa. Thank you for being our visiting professor in the College of Business and Economics. Dr. Kelsley O'Connor of the National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies in Luxembourg, the World Happiness Report contributor. So you're welcome to the University of Johannesburg. We're happy to have you here. So colleagues, I'll be inviting Dr. Ralipat Amboti, our Chief Operations Officer, to introduce the University of Johannesburg and the session. Doc, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Muloi. Esteemed guests, distinguished panelists, our global visitors, and all who are joining us online, it is indeed for me a great pleasure and a true honor to welcome you to this historic occasion, the first ever launch of the World Happiness Report on the African soil, right here at the University of Johannesburg. Today, on the 20th of March, 2025, as the world celebrates the International Day of Happiness, we gather here at the University of Johannesburg to mark a significant milestone. For the first time in its history, this globally recognized report is being launched from Africa, reflecting the continent's growing influence in shaping the global discourse on well-being, happiness, and sustainable development. UJ is proud to serve as the host for this momentous event, bringing together thought leaders, policymakers, researchers to explore Africa's unique perspectives on happiness. The World Happiness Report, a collaboration between Gallup, the Oxford Wellbeing Research Center, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and the World Health Report Editorial Board, has since its inception provided critical insights into happiness and life satisfaction across the globe. This year's report will be unveiled through a series of live-streamed events from around the world, with Africa taking center stage right here in Johannesburg. As we engage in discussions today, let us embrace the African philosophy of Ubuntu, I am because we are. In my language, we say, Mutu ki mutu ka batho, a testament to the strength of social bonds, community, and shared well-being. May this event spark new ideas, inspire meaningful policy changes, and reinforce Africa's vital role in the global happiness movement. Welcome to the Africa launch of the World Happiness Report 2025. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mputi. So we appreciate your welcoming remarks. So colleagues, if I can also introduce Dr. Hussein Kuvadia, the Vice Dean Global Engagement, Professor Thea Tselepis, the Vice Dean in the College of Business and Economics, Teaching and Learning, Prof. Inaunye Eita, the Director of the School of Economics at the CBE, Professor Daniel van Lille, the former Dean of the College of Business and Economics. Can I check if Prof. Helliwell is already online? Well done. Prof, good afternoon, and it's in the afternoon in South Africa. So then, colleagues, I'm introducing Prof. John Helliwell, who's a Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of British Columbia, the Senior Fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, CIFA, and the Co-Director of the CIFA Program on Social Interaction, Identity and Well-Being. His research focus is well-being economics and measures, subjective well-being from around the world to help understand what makes lives better, with special attention to social factors. He's also a board director of International Positive Psychology Association and the editor of the World Happiness Report. Prof, we're looking forward to cross over to you so to review the 2025 World Happiness Report findings. So we're crossing over, Prof, to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Am I visible?
You are visible and you are audible.
It remains to be seen whether I'm credible.
No, audible, Prof. But also you are credible.
We'll hope for the best.
Thank you.
I will share my screen now.
Thank you, Prof.
Is the presentation visible correctly now?
Yes,
yes, Prof, we can see it. We can see it. We can also hear you.
Am I still visible?
Yes, you are.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Can I be heard?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you. You can begin.
And is the screen the appropriate screen?
It's perfect.
It is the appropriate screen. You are visible and we can see it. We can see you.
Good. Well, in that case, you've got the front screen, and I'll move immediately to the next screen. But first, I just want to say what an enormous pleasure it is for me to be able to share this event with you. I agree with you that to have the World Happiness Report coming out of Africa is indeed a compliment to the report and an important step forward. Thank you all for making this happen. The theme this year is caring and sharing. And I'm going to give you, first of all, the material in the chapter I'm most responsible for, and then I'll take you briefly through the other chapters as quickly as I can. Here are the overall rankings. You can get this from the report, and this shows not only it's the top 20 and the bottom 20, but it shows that with those ranges there, what the average levels of life evaluation are from the very top of about 7.7 to the very bottom in Afghanistan, which shares the fact of a world that's getting worse and worse for people there. Now, here are regional trends in benevolence. You'll hear more about the special African features of the data, but let me draw you to the bottom left panel there, that as we track benevolence over time, sub-Saharan Africa is indeed that region of the world where benevolence has been rising most steadily, rose most during the COVID years, and has stayed up most reliably. So that's all very good news. We're proud in the world as a whole to have that benevolence showing itself in Africa, where the most dominant form is indeed the helping of strangers, which is the most important form. Now I'm turning immediately to some of the detail of the report. One of the things we have specialized in and looked at carefully this year is the evidence on the dropping of wallets. And I'm going to get back to some detail on this later on, but we found from a Lloyd's Register Foundation risk poll that asked people how likely their wallet was to be returned in the same scale as they were asked about future harm from mental health, future harm from violent crime. And then we also measured benevolent acts, which are the usual things we monitored and I just showed you. But note here that these are the effects on happiness. And the effects on happiness of believing you're in a kind environment are way greater than the effects of current unemployment or expected harm from mental health or violent crime. That's a dramatic way of showing that kindness counts. Here is inequality. It's a thing we keep track of all the time, and you'll see there's been a big increase globally in well-being inequality within countries. The actual inequality across countries, that's the red line, in fact, has been pretty constant. So the world is not converging, but nor is it diverging the way that well-being levels are within many individual countries. An extra twist we had is to say, what are the effects of benevolence and kindness on bad things happen? How do they affect the inequality of well-being? And the answer is people who believe they are living in a society where other people are fair and helpful are much less affected by unemployment, bad family circumstances, low health in a group that's discriminated against or feeling unsafe after dark. Thus, to live in a kind society is also to live in a society where there's more equality in the distribution of well-being. And we also find important things. People are fair and helpful, very important, and even more important than trust in the police and other traditional forms of social capital. All are important, as you can see, and believing in the kindness of others, especially so. Now, getting back to the wallet question, we find that when we look across countries, two things we get from these wallet data. First of all, we know from our survey data that people are much happier living or thinking their wallets will be returned. The question then is that skeptics ask, how do we know that they're actually right about these perceptions? And we learn two things about these perceptions through the dropping of actual wallets. One is that these people do know, in a sense, that the countries where wallet return is highest are also the countries where people expect it to be highest. But if you look at the difference between the purple bars and the yellow bars, you'll see that all over the world, and these are the Nordic and non-Nordic countries from a group of 40 countries where actual wallets were dropped, and we also have the data for perceptions, that there's a huge difference between the actual and the expected returns. The next slide shows that from a variety of sources, we've got individual wallet dropping experiments within the USA at the right and within Canada and the left, and two by Reader's Digest and one by Science. They all show that everywhere all over the world, people are too pessimistic about the kindness of others. So to actually tell this story and believe it changes the way in which people think of their neighbors. This way, they are then much more likely to treat a stranger as a friend they haven't met yet. Now I'm going to go through very briefly, because I've been asked to be short so we can have more question and answer time. That was the substance of chapter 2. We then find in a special survey this year and a chapter devoted to it that people are much happier when they share meals with each other. And so number of shared meals rises until all your meals are shared, in which case you never get out and it drops off at the right-hand end. But until that point, the more sharing of meals, the better. Then we have another chapter this year. It's a wonderfully diverse report this year. We have invited a lot of proposals and have a wide range of chapters with a variety of perspectives and a really high quality of authors we have managed to attract. This is a chapter by a Latin American team where they use both European data and Latin American data, and they're showing one aspect of the importance of the family. And this is actually this household size, and looking at the average happiness by household size. And they find both in Europe and in Latin America that to live alone is much the worst thing to do. And in fact, larger families are families of happier people up until at least 4 or 5. At some stage, perhaps enough is enough. This is a chapter that came out of California where they're looking at young people. They're showing a decline of young people in having someone to report on. It's not a very big decline, you'll notice, but what they're emphasizing is that it's actually possible, especially in these early years, time away from home as the students they look at are going through, that in fact, simply by telling people the possibilities that other people are kind actually makes people kinder as well as making them happier. So these are controlled experiments proving what I've been alleging to you, that in fact, to believe in the kindness of others actually improves your happiness, makes you more likely to be kind, and improves the happiness of others. There is also a chapter, and Kelsey O'Connor's been an important contributor to that chapter, showing that where countries increase the frequency of benevolent acts, they find they're also likely to have fewer deaths of despair. We emphasize in the report that the creation of the positives is much more important than eliminating negatives, but eliminating negatives remains one of the things that we, of course, expect to find from a kinder world. Then this is harder to see on your screen, but the chapter coming out of a French team is showing that within Europe, when people are unhappy, they move to extremes in their political views. But if they're high trust people, then they're more likely to have views that are on the left side of extreme, while if they're untrusting, they move to the right. Finally, we have a chapter that reviews the quality of institutions set up to deliver charities. It's just a first look at it, saying, actually, once we're looking at giving, we want to be able to assess those. I have now used the allotted time for my initial presentation, so I turn it back to you once again, saying what a great pleasure it is for me to be able to join you here today.
I must say I've learned something today. As a marathoner and an ultra marathoner, so we always grab and run, grab, eat and run. So now I didn't know that sharing a meal, Prof. Daniel, is so important.
Am I
Because
still?
we always grab and run and eat. Thank you, Prof. Thank you for sharing that with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, so we also acknowledge the presence of the former Vice Dean of the College of Business and Economics, Professor Sivan Chetty. Prof. You're welcomed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with songs, in Afrikaans they say inflates. So then you clap, showing happiness for Prof. Talita Greiling. So they showed me you go like this. Professor Talita Grilling is a professor in the School of Economics in the College of Business and Economics at the great University of Johannesburg in this beautiful country we call home, South Africa. She specializes in well-being economics and the quality of life studies. She developed and established the Gross National Happiness Index, today GNH Today project. The project uses the 4IR methods and big data to construct real-time happiness and emotion data. Consequently, the GNH Today project partnered with the Auckland University of Technology. The project received the Vice Chancellor's Distinguished Award for Innovation and was accepted as official statistical data by Stats New Zealand. Prof. Talita is the author of numerous articles in both multidisciplinary and economics journals. She is the joint winner of the sought-after ISQOLS Research Fellow Award for Quality of Life Research. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, with flags and hands, Prof. Talita Grilling.
Good evening, everybody. Similar to Prof. Grilling, can you hear me? Can you see me? And just, it is fantastic. I never thought. Now you can hear me. I never thought I would share a stage with Professor John Helliwell. I'm happy, but I would like to tell you a little bit more of what's happened in Africa. So you've heard the global perspective, and now you must please help me. Kelsey, can I ask you to just keep time for me because I get taken away and then I forget about time. 10 minutes. Thank you. So we already heard, it's about caring and sharing. And what a wonderful place to have this launch in Africa because we care and we share. Just to give you an idea of Africa, if you look at that map, the brighter the colors, the higher the life satisfaction. Not happiness, life satisfaction is an evaluative measure of quality of life. Can you see Africa? We're the little pale continent in the middle, which means our life satisfaction is really low. So this focus on Africa, to launch it from Africa, will put us more in the spotlight and in future help our well-being. Just to show you quickly, those are the top countries in the world. Do you see Africa there? No, we don't make it. All right, but here we can see who are the best performers in Africa in life evaluation. Okay, and it's like, always like the Olympics, who's won the gold? It is Mauritius. No surprise, they've got a strong economy, they're doing really well. Then second, Libya. I was actually surprised, and I should not be, because Libya is an oil-rich country and has been taking that money and giving it back to its people, building some social security, having wonderful policies in place. Next is Algeria, very similar, oil-rich country and really changing policy. And then is South Africa. So we would like to get South Africa move up a few spaces. Let's watch for next year. Then just to quickly show you who's moving up and down, and we can see Libya, South Africa, and Congo moved down places. And then one up for Namibia, our neighboring country, they moved into the top 10. And then everybody else moved up, well done. And we have Senegal, I'm so sorry to say, dropped out of the top 10. If we look at who has been making the most progress over time in Africa, then also, this is really interesting. If we look at the countries, we have two countries in West Africa, and then Gabon in Central Africa. So we've got Guinea and Senegal. Senegal dropped out of the top 10, but still it made amazing progress. Especially if you look at what they have in common is policy reforms, and also policy reforms for the youth. The youth is an asset for Africa. I think we've got the most youth in the world, and that is a luxury, an asset to Africa. Then if we look at the bottom 10, and this is the sad part. So this is really where we need to work very hard. And if we look right at the bottom is Sierra Leone. And very often it is war-torn countries that will rank right at the bottom. Then also concerning Malawi, and then it's surprising that so many of South Africa's neighboring countries are ranked at the bottom. So we can see Botswana, Zimbabwe. If we go up, Lesotho is at 20. So here, South Africa can also play a role in increasing that life satisfaction of those countries. If we then look at what we've got, Egypt as a newcomer to the bottom 10. So that's nothing to get excited about. We know that in Egypt there's political instability, many concerns, so moving into the bottom 10. And Zambia has moved up. Also, policy changes, high levels of democracy. So very happy to see that Zambia has moved out of the bottom 10. Then just to look at positive emotions. Now, positive emotions is the happiness. You always hear Finland is the happiness country in the world. No, not the happiest. It's got the highest life evaluation. Happiness is very well known in Africa. We know what's happy. So it is a smile and we are happy. So let's just look at who are the happiest countries in Africa. And here's Senegal. Senegal is really happy. And it's not just the happiest country in Africa, it is one of the happiest countries in the world. So, and then we've got the Niger and we've got Lesotho. So even though their life satisfaction is not that high, we can say they're happy. How? This is very contradicting. Can you be happy if your life evaluation is not that high? Yes, you can, if you're in Africa. So if we look at the correlation between the life ladder or life satisfaction, life evaluation, and happiness, you can see those little crosses there, the pink ones at the top, it's Africa. So even if our life satisfaction is not that high, we are a happy continent. And we wonder why. That culture of Ubuntu, caring, we will see that benevolence really plays a big role in Africa and is one of our wealths. If we then just look at benevolence, and it's wonderful that in this year's World Happiness Report, these indicators were included, which wasn't there before, and it measures benevolence. There's 3 of these indicators. The one is helping a stranger, the other one is donating time, and the other volunteering time and donating money. Now, if you look at Africa, yeah, we are shining. We are the best performer if it's about helping a stranger. So I have seen so many television programs lately with people traveling through Africa, and the one thing they always comment on is everybody is friendly and willing to help. So we're very proud of Africa. We're comparing it to Europe there, and you can see that we outperform them in almost everything, except donating money, because Africa don't have that type of money. So we are doing really well, and once again, if you look at the Nordic countries, that part of Europe, they're not there. Then just to show you again a correlation between your life evaluation and then again between looking at helping a stranger, the strongest measure of benevolence in Africa. And you can see once again, you don't have to have the best quality of life to be able to help a stranger. And this is what happens in Africa. It's once again that Ubuntu, caring about people, which is really important in well-being. And this is just to show you, where did Africa show some growth in the indicators? Where have we performed better over time? And we can see, helping a stranger, obviously we are still doing better and growing more than the rest of the world. Then freedom to make choices has improved over time. Happiness has improved over time. If we look at the life ladder, it is really sad, but it actually has decreased. And then we have health also decreased, which is not good. Perception of corruption decrease is the one. And then just lastly, we know that we can measure, we need to measure something to be able to manage it. So we have Gallup, which gives us data, which is fantastic. They are the only company that can actually give us data on well-being for all countries of the world. But if we lack data, we need it. So here's another option, is to use big data, AI, to create data. And that's exactly what we've been doing at the University of Johannesburg with the GNH.Today project, creating data so that we can measure well-being and then improve it in the future. So this is the project of proudly University of Johannesburg, South Africa and Africa, and we believe we can actually continue to increase data availability to manage well-being. And thank you again for the World Happiness Report, so that we could have launched in Africa. We are very thankful for that, and we believe the focus will now move to Africa. Thank you again.
Thank you, Professor. You can have the mic. So they say a good dancer knows when to leave a stage. I'm now about to leave the stage. Colleagues, Professor Erika Kramembula leads the UJ DST NRF Newton Fund Trilateral Chain Transformative Innovation, the Fourth Industrial Revolution and Sustainable Development. She's a professor of economics in the School of Economics, in the Mighty College of Business and Economics, and the Great University of Johannesburg. She specializes in science, technology, innovation, and policy analysis and innovation systems in connection to equitable and sustainable development. As you welcome Professor Erika Kramembula. Professor.
Good evening, everybody. And yes, it's an honor to be here and to help moderate this panel of very distinguished speakers. I'll take a seat and I will invite our panelists to please join me on the stage. I will briefly introduce you Professor Martijn Burger, Academic Director of Erasmus Happiness Economics Research Organization and visiting professor at the University of Johannesburg. Great. We have Professor Talita Hrelin, professor with us at UJ and well-being economist and African leading scholar in well-being, and internationally known for her work in well-being and AI. We have Rashid Sedat, who is the Executive Director of GCRO, the Gauteng City Region Observatory, a partnership between UJ, VETS, and the Gauteng Provincial Government. Welcome. And we have Sodwa Mabusa, who is the Chief of Sub-Regional Initiatives at UNECA in Zambia. He recently joined from the African Development Bank, originally from Eswatini. Welcome. So there has been so much that has been discussed in the presentations. Very refreshing set of data that we've heard, but perhaps we need to understand a little bit more the indicators themselves. So I would like to start with you, Martijn, if that's okay, to explain a little bit to us the difference between happiness and life satisfaction. We could gather from the presentations that there is a significant difference there to be made. So how do we need to distinguish between them?
I think that, yeah, okay, it works. I think that if we talk about well-being, that we should take in first that we have as a human being two ways to assess whether we are doing well or not. So we can compare our current life with the best possible life we can imagine. We can also compare to the worst possible life that we can have in mind. And that is what we call a life evaluation, being satisfied with life or not. In addition, we can feel good most of the time or not. So that is what Professor Grayling also showed, the affective well-being. It's the balance of positive and negative feelings. Positive feelings can, for example, be enjoyment and smiling a lot during the day. Negative feelings encompass worry, sadness. Usually you are asked to answer a number of questions and then an index is made.
Great. Perhaps if I can follow up with you, Prof. Grelin, on that, because you mentioned that, I mean, there's a big social aspect, pro-social behavior, as Prof. Berger just explained, that takes quite a lot of weight within how we measure happiness. You mentioned Ubuntu in your presentation, and it seems that those pro-social behaviors are very dominant in the African continent, and perhaps is a big explanatory part of how we're doing in terms of happiness levels. How is that important in life evaluation, and how important it is compared to other indicators?
If we think of social relationships, and my husband is here, so I know that it makes me really happy if we are friendly and we move out of the house and we are both friendly. So social capital is very, very important to your well-being. It is as important as money. So one of the other indicators is money, but it is just as important, especially if you already met your basic needs, or as important as health. So social capital really plays a very big role in your well-being.
Okay, excellent. And so Ubuntu has a big part of, we explained this pro-social behavior in the light of Ubuntu.
Well, the one thing about Ubuntu is about community, we care. And in Africa, there is still this community. People still eat together, they still share food. They have time for one another. And this is something that we lack in developed world. So that feeling of Ubuntu, really caring about your community, being able to help a stranger, those things is something that we can teach the rest of the world. Maybe they had it many years ago, but they lost a lot of it along the way.
Excellent. I would like to turn over to Sodwa Mabuza. You have a vast experience in Africa, and we often talk about the African young youth dividend, right? Our young population is how we're looking into the future, and is what distinct our region from other regions in the world where they are dealing primarily with aging populations. Now, how do these concepts of Ubuntu, pro-social behavior, and so on reflect in our African youth?
Okay. Young people in Africa, I would say, we always say they're the future, but the question is, are we giving them the opportunities? I'll start by saying, if you look at the rankings, you've mentioned countries like Senegal that have improved. What does that mean about the youth of that country? I think there is hope for them. And we are seeing a lot of these collaboration among young people from Southern Africa to North Africa. You are seeing a lot of collaboration in music. You see South African music artists collaborating with young Nigerians in the spirit of Ubuntu. So I would say we are seeing some positive developments around young people. And perhaps one can link it to some of the developments like the African Continental Free Trade Area, which sort of like connects them. And this whole thing about connectivity, that we are living in a global village, I think it is giving hope to young people in Africa.
That's fascinating that we are, when I saw the indicators, it was primarily measured as to the connections that are happening within families, how people eat together, within communities, but you're also saying that this connectivity also has to do, we have to look at it across countries as well. So regional integration may actually play a role in how we look into the future of these indicators. That's fascinating. I would like to ask perhaps Rashid, your organization is very involved in collecting indicators. We're talking at the regional level now. We're talking about connecting, connectivity at the regional level, Pan-African level. We're also talking about what is happening in countries, in the rankings. We're talking about what is happening in communities. Seems like it's quite important to take some of these measurements at the local level, what is happening on the ground. And your quality of life survey, that's precisely that. How do you see the similarities and the complementarities between the quality of life survey that you conduct at GCRO and the indicators that we're seeing here today?
Thanks, Erica, and good evening, everyone. Let me briefly tell you about our quality of life survey. It's basically one of the largest social surveys in South Africa, bar some things that Stats SA does. We do 14,000 face-to-face interviews, and it's the 7th iteration. We're very proud of this survey. It costs a lot of money, but it generates enormous amounts of data. Our focus is very much on sort of demographics, but in particular socioeconomic circumstances of households, access to services, but we also ask other questions like life satisfaction and so on. So, I mean, I think that there is a definite element of commonality between the two surveys. Okay, maybe the difference are, as articulated by our previous speakers, I think they're very sort of interesting kind of indicators that are used, like wallet being returned and so on. I mean, we certainly don't do those sorts of things to give an indication of this notion of happiness as has been articulated. But we do ask questions on satisfaction and social satisfaction, basically talking about social capital and social cohesion type of questions, and I think there is that kind of commonality. I think what we did see. Let me just say what's interesting was that during COVID. There was, and we did the survey during the COVID period, we actually saw an increase in social capital. And in fact, in the next survey, which is the current one that we're doing, we've actually seen a bit of a decline.
We are so used to seeing the measurement of well-being proxied by GDP and income type of indicators, even at the provincial level. So it's great to know that there's other types of data that can inform the way in which we think about well-being and happiness. But why should we prioritize well-being and happiness over this income GDP? What argument? How do we convince the broader, particularly decision makers, but also the academic community on how to use this?
Well, I first want to stress that it's that looking at income and poverty is also important. But if you look at quality of life, you don't only want to look at the conditions for a good life, you also want to look at the outcomes for a good life. And I think as human beings, we all want to live happily ever after, just like in the fairy tales, and that is also what we try to measure with the well-being measure. So in a way, it gives us the opportunity to gauge like how happy are we, but it also then helps us to identify like what are the conditions like for a good life by linking income, poverty, but also health, social relations to happiness, and see what's most important and what distinguishes happy people from unhappy people.
Great. Prof. Leilin, can I ask you, do you think this is particularly important in the context of Africa? Or is it equally important globally? Or is there something about Africa that demands a broader measurement of well-being over and above GDP?
For sure, I'm a well-being economist. I will definitely say we need to strive for well-being. Just to strive for money or for income, income is a means to an end. It's not the end. You can have a lot of money, but you don't have the feedback of the pleasure, the happiness around it. And as we say, well-being is not only money, it's also about education, health, social relationships, safety. So the concept of well-being, that we strive for well-being, is a much broader idea of than just a means of income. So definitely for Africa, we want well-being to increase, not only money. We want the bigger concept, we want it all.
Great. Let me follow up with Mrs. Mabuse. I think I need to ask, because when we think about well-being and when we think about broader ways of understanding it, my mind immediately goes to the SDGs, right? We have this set of indicators, of goals rather, that we've set up and agreed to globally, and the UN has been promoting the SDGs, and obviously there's an element of well-being in there to citizens of the world. So how is Africa doing in some of the key SDGs, and how do we relate this to well-being and the discussion we're having today?
I'm happy you've raised that, because when I was reading the report, I realized that it sort of discounts the monetary aspects of it, but it informs a lot on the life evaluation. I can imagine if somebody were to ask me if I were to take part in the survey, I'll definitely think of unemployment, I'll think of insecurity, I'll think of hunger, I'll think of poverty, all what the UN is trying to address. So for me, these are very important. And if you look at the rankings for this report, Africa is not really doing well in I don't think by 2030 we would have met the SDGs in a way that is promising. So I would say some countries are showing some positive progress, especially when it comes to education, maybe health. But I think with a lot of what is happening now, the wars, instability, and maybe the decisions to cut aid by the US government is going to affect Africa in terms of achieving some of the SDGs. So this whole notion of caring and sharing, I think is aptly in the context of Africa. And we have it, as Prof. Talita is saying, in Africa we share meals, and from a religious point of view, we call it fellowship, where we come together, we eat, and we are increasingly, because of the economic situation, we're seeing more and more families resorting to living together, which enhances happiness. But obviously, if then it's 10 family members in a two-bedroom house, it may not add to happiness. So I would say it's a mixed bag in terms of the attainment of SDGs among African countries. And it really is disheartening to see that in the top 100, there are only 7 African countries. So it means we still have a lot to do, and I would say if we can balance in terms of ensuring that we meet SDGs, we will see more improvements in happiness and well-being.
Great. One of the aims of the SDGs was to become sort of key objectives that would guide decision-making in terms of government, design of policy programs and support, and targeting investment to achieve those objectives, right? To what extent is Is that one of the issues why we're not moving towards achieving the SDGs, in your view?
Well, I think it has to do mainly with policy reforms. We do have the targets. I'll say most African governments, but you have issues around debt, you have issues around political instability, which then means all those objectives or goals that were set at the international level cannot be met. But there is that intention, because if you consider what is happening within the African continent, especially on the integration aspect, there's that realization that Africa presents a huge opportunity, but historically we've been trading with other regions than among ourselves and trading in commodities. So this drive on industrialization probably will see Africa trading among itself as opposed to, trading in commodities and then having external shocks in terms of currency fluctuations, but also changing in multilateralism, the development of tariffs. So if we were to work together as a continent, we can achieve the policy objectives.
That speaks a little bit, I think, about the importance of the evidence policy nexus, the extent to which the data that we have is able to inform decision making. You gave us a picture of how does that look like at the Pan-African regional level? How does that look like at the level of the province, for instance, in relation to the indicators that you collect in the quality of life?
So, I should start by saying that actually we are a very unique partnership between provincial government in South Africa, WITS, UJ, and organized local government. So we sit at a very sort of kind of interesting juncture between the academy, which is supposed to provide evidence and data and so on, and government, which actually has to implement policy. And what we found is that in the 7th iterations of our quality of life survey, in fact, things have gotten worse. And we had our launch last year in October, and we invited the Premier to come and speak. He was on the panel, much like this one. And we were very, I think, pleased that he wasn't defensive about the decline in satisfaction across services and government performance. So I think that's the first step, that politicians mustn't become defensive about what they see, number one. And number two, it needs to be integrated into planning and policy making. So we do that on a very conscious basis, so that we can point out what is the evidence, make recommendations where possible, and sometimes even do more detailed policy. So like right now, for example, we're working on the economic development plan for the Gauteng province, for example. So that's a much more extended way, but there are different, like there's a spectrum of interventions that we can, not interventions, but sort of positions that we can put forward that will basically strengthen the evidence and policy nexus.
Let me follow up on that with yourself, Prof. Relin. You have become such an ambassador of this work, and I'm sure that you have ideas about how to improve the uptake and the use, or whether you have seen an improvement in the uptake and the use of this type of data, both in academia, by others. We often talk about interdisciplinarity and how important it is to collaborate across disciplines, to work with different social sciences, including economics. I'm thinking about my own work and how important it is to broaden the way in which we integrate this into our work. But ideas on how can the uptake of this in academia, but also in decision making, and perhaps even by NGOs or other organizations or stakeholders in society. Have you seen an improvement, or what are your views?
Well, remember that we have to have a goal that we strive to. The Sustainable Development Goals is part of those goals. And the ultimate goal is to reach the well-being. But how do we know that we've reached the well-being or the level? We need the data. We need data to guide us, to tell us what progress we have made. We've just heard that if there's measures in place, we can say the quality of life decreased or it increased. And we can also see why. What went wrong? Was it service delivery? Was it a lack of electricity in South Africa? So once we know where the problem is, we can zoom in, we can get the policy in place, make the changes, and we can then strive to well-being. And that is where we would like to go. So have we seen a change in well-being? Have we seen a change with the data availability? Well, we can see some countries has progressed. For example, Senegal, there was progress, and there was measures to show where we are going to. Otherwise, the policy interventions will not be there. But it's very important to have the data. You can't manage anything if you can't measure it. So we need data. And in Africa, we've got a major lack of data. So we really need the data. And it's not that we say that we are statistical officers to collect not only the data on income, GDP, growth. We are asking them to collect data on quality of life measures, including life evaluation, happiness, because those are outcomes of policy. If we can't measure it, we never know if we're going to reach it.
May I quickly follow up on that with you, because data collection is not an easy or a cheap exercise. And often there needs to be a clear sense on how it's going to be used, what is the value of that data, what would be your key recommendation to decision makers, funders that may be considering investing in collecting this type of data? And perhaps I would like to pose that to you.
So, yeah, that's a two-part question. I mean, the first thing is that it's actually, I mean, in the way that we do it and have been doing it, is that, you know, we in our last survey, which was conducted in 2023-24, we went to 14,000 households, and we only had a 50% hit rate. In other words, our field workers went to 28,000 households in the whole of Gauteng, face-to-face for 45 minutes, interviews, asking 200 questions. Now, I know that sounds like I mean, most people think that's absolutely nuts. It has been done. And you know, and I think from a sort of methodological point of view and so on, it's been, you know, it's been signed off by statisticians and so on, but it is an incredibly difficult and expensive endeavor. Okay, and we've been fortunate so far that our main funders, who happen to be the Gauteng Province, Wits University and UJ, have collectively come to the party to basically support us to do that. Of course, in the context of current sort of austerity, we know the budget is up in the air, the national budget is up in the air at the moment, so there are some worries about that, but it doesn't mean they're going to like pull the plug completely. But in fact, that's also in the context of telling the politicians the bad news. So we collect the data and we say, but actually, you know what, the last time around you haven't done well. That's exactly what happened in the most recent survey. So we have to be like cautious about how we do it, but it's I think we've been able to, and fortunately our politicians have not been defensive, and I think that has been a very important part of ensuring the taps are open as far as, I should say that we get in the order of 30 million rand a year, and we save up money every 2 to 3 years to run the survey. The last survey cost us 16 million rand. So that's what we're talking about.
Great. So we have to invest in this kind of data for better decision making. I'm mindful of time, and I would like to get some inputs from the audience. I have a couple of more questions that I would like to pose, but I would like to also open it up for a few minutes. I believe we have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. So. Anybody that has a comment or a thought? Great, excellent. And if you don't mind to introduce yourself briefly when you ask the question.
Thank you very much. I'm Vera Creel. So my question is specifically Prof. Gradin. I think in the context of the question is around 8th of March being International Women's Day. Tomorrow we have Human Rights Day. And through the data and the well-being research that you've done, have you seen any relationship in terms of equality for women and also human rights and then life satisfaction, happiness?
Well, I must say that is not my exact research topic. But we can say if there's more freedom of action, more gender equality, we definitely see an increase in well-being. And I think South Africa gives us an example where we are progressively moving in the right direction. Let's compare it with other countries like Afghanistan, where you see we're right at the bottom. So human rights, freedom of speech, being able to choose the life you would like to live, that all increase well-being. And I can just add, as I said, data. Data is so important. So with data, we can also measure how does the equality increase. And if the data is not available by surveys, we've got other ways to do it. We've got the big data. We've got AI, which is much easier to collect. But first, we need survey data because that's the true measure. And without that, we can't estimate any well-being data from what we gather from big data and machine learning. But that was really a spot-on question. Women's Day, women's tops, obviously.
Great. Other questions from the floor? This is your one chance. Great. Please go ahead.
Thanks. So what's the next step for UJ and to bring this forward? So the well-being agenda, the happiness agenda for Africa, and maybe it's related to the SDGs.
Well, the next step for UJ is we are establishing a new center, and the center is about well-being and AI, especially using new technologies. UJ is at the front of we are technology-driven, AI-driven. We can use these things to create data. So from UJ's point of view, the center will do research on well-being, and we know if we do the research, we can actually improve well-being. So I think today is a wonderful day to put UJ out there. We are here, we're part of South Africa, we're part of Africa, and we can make a difference. Also, UJ this year is the 20th birthday of UJ, and for a very young university, we are doing incredibly well. So I believe doing this research in well-being will even take us that 2, 3, 5 steps, a little bit higher. Let's compete with Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard.
Excellent. Any other? I saw another hand earlier, but I think it's gone. Ah, there it is. Great.
Thank you. I'm Vivan Sekaritanyi. My first question is to Prof. Greiring. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. But you present statistics, the figures. I would like to find out who was the respondents to the survey, because as you said, there were a lot of surprises, a lot of information that can really surprise many people who know what is happening on this continent. My second question is to Ms. Mabuza. You also seem to be optimistic about this continent in terms of the success of the SDG, UN SDG. I would like to find out on which basis are you really optimistic, given what is happening on this continent in terms of human rights abuse, women abuse, selfishness of politicians, and so on and so on. Many things that we see on this continent. How are we going to succeed on the application of the SDG? Do we have, or can we think of some enforcement mechanism, for instance, so that there is a kind of compliance toward the success? Thank you.
Firstly, to answer the question about the survey, I wish it was my survey, but this is a global survey. It's done by Gallup, and it's done in every country in the world, not necessarily every year, and it's got a representative sample where these questions are actually put to the people in the country. But you can imagine the amount of money, we just heard what it costs to do one survey in a country. So the survey, I think it was done under 130 countries for this year, and we are very, very thankful because this is the only data we have where we can compare countries across the world. So Gallup at this stage, the only source of data. We have a need of data. I hope people hear us, and we need the survey data because that we can use as a true measure. Once we've got a true measure, we can start estimating. We love economic stats, modeling, econometric modeling, but our hands are cut off if we don't have something to estimate against, which is then survey data.
Great. There was another question for...
It's a very difficult question, but I would say to succeed in this development work that we're doing, you need a great deal of optimism. Not to minimize the challenges that the continent faces. You've mentioned mismanagement, human rights violation, all those are happening. But for me, I do have hope for the continent, and I'm placing my hope to young people, and I can see them here. Maybe it's part of this happiness day that I have to be optimistic. But I do believe that if we were to address the issues that we are talking about, the issues of leadership, because where there are pockets of good governance, of leadership, you are seeing a lot of improvement. I mean, Mauritius, the leading country, it's because they realize that they have to survive, which is why when we talk about regional integration, you don't have to convince Mauritius. Even before these AFTAs came, the WTO, they were already open because they realized that they can't survive on their own. That's the leadership. But also, if you realize that you need to invest in education, which is what they've done. I mean, Botswana next door, they're starting to reap benefits of education. Look how young the cabinet is, how educated they are. And that's where my optimism comes from. Senegal, you have a young leadership. I mean, Burkina Faso, okay, it's a coup, but when you see what is happening on the ground, you can only be optimistic. I mean, we can't all be telling the sad story of Africa. We are aware of it, but if we were to focus on what's right and encourage countries, amplify what's going right within the continent, I believe we can all progress.
Excellent. We have one hand here.
Erica, I've got no idea to whom I should address this question, but I'll leave it to your graces. Talita, you said that you referred to the importance to translate data into a sensible strategy. And I think especially in the geopolitics that we kind of now experience, this is so true. There's a difference between strategy and sensible strategy. And the key thing that you've mentioned continuously is the importance of having massive data sets in order to make sense of everything, to see where the hierarchical imperatives are, for that matter. So we've heard about the report that you are presenting tonight here in our continent. We've heard about 14,000 interviews after a 50% hit rate. I'm not sure whether it was qualitative and quantitative, but anyway, that's part of the story. We've heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. We hear day and night about university rankings based on research on the Sustainable Development Goals. And so I can continue. You mentioned Gallup as a major source, but surely that cannot be the only one. What about the World Health Organization? So how on earth do you bring all of this together? So it doesn't seem to me as though there's a shortage of data. It's mining the data that I'm concerned about. And then there are also AI issues. AI is a very powerful tool, and there's a huge debate across universities about the applications of AI, or the ethical applications of AI. How do we make sense of all of this in order to understand what I perceive as a rather unhappy world? Oh, that was a long one. Thank you, Erica, for tolerating me.
Please go ahead. Oh, Martin.
It's some excellent remarks. There is a lot of data out there, but it's also scattered all across the world. I think that with AI, we can collect like a lot of new data, but it's not the only data that we can rely on. We should also combine it with survey data, combine it with objective indicators, and try indeed to make sense of this data in a system where we look what are the conditions for a good life, what is important, and what do we need to do in order to increase well-being. And yeah, what you need to do might differ from country to country. So it's not only like collecting like the big data sets, but maybe also like within a country, we should do more carefully policy evaluation, which is like a more detailed study of specific policies and what kind of effect they have on their well-being. If you do policy evaluation, I think you also have to like pay more careful attention to the causality of like the relationship that you study, or does the policy really have a causal impact on the well-being of people? And that is very like difficult to study like with global data. If you pick the Gallup data and you want to analyze a specific policy or reform in the government, then there is also a lot of other things going on in that country at the same time. So we need to sum up different kind of studies in order to get more information on how to improve the well-being of people. And that is also the goal of the research that we do here. We don't do research for the sake of research. We do research to make a better world, to contribute to a greater happiness for a greater number of people.
Can I just supplement what's just been said? Actually, we were asked about 4 or 5 weeks ago by the presidency, I mean, if you've been watching the news, there's been an intervention in the city of Johannesburg. And they asked us to use our data to basically do a report on the state of the city. And I mean, coming back to what you were saying, I mean, it is like actually for impact, right? And with a clear research question, okay? What is the state of the city? So our data is geocoded, so and you know, it's kind of divided up into all of the different municipalities and so on. And we produced a 90-page report on using 80% of what was in that document was data coming from the GCRO, most of which had not been used before. So I mean, just having that repository is really like a powerful thing to actually effect societal change. So I think that's a sort of, and having that repository is really important. We've got 7 iterations of the survey. Think about like 200 questions each. I mean, think about the number of cross-tabulations and so on, and analysis you can actually do out of that. So the collection is really important, but also we need to have a sense of what are those critical things that we want to effect societal impact on, and then basically use the data to answer those questions.
Great. I think we are getting to the point where we need to start wrapping up this panel. It's been such a great discussion. Sorry, I can't see that part. But it's been such a great discussion. But do we have a few more minutes, Ronel? 3 minutes, great. Okay, so I want to ask you, many of you have said things that relate to a vision of the future. And I would like to end on that note, on how would you like the future to look like when it comes to the collection of this data, the use of this data, and the application of this data into decision making. Only in about 30 seconds. So what is your vision of the future? If you can paint it for us, that would be great.
I think
that's the immediate future.
Well, okay, so I can only give a very short answer to this. We are now working together with UJ in a wonderful project, Well-being in a Sustainable Economy, which is a project of European universities and also the University of Johannesburg, to bring together all the data that there is on well-being and to build like one integrative data set of survey data and also AI data on well-being, and put that into a repository and also harmonize that data so that they become better comparable than they are now. And that's like a first step, and you can also do that with other type of data.
Great.
It's wonderful to have the expert next to me. Well, the point is we need the data, but data alone can't do it. We need the research, the analysis, and once we know what the data says, is to have the impact. We need to use that data, get it into policy so that the policy changes can be there. How can this happen? We need stable governments so that we can follow this process through. And we also then need the trust in the governments so that the people can actually do what the policy measures recommend.
Wonderful.
Just very quickly, you know, about 15, 20 years ago, I don't know how long it was, I read an article in The Economist which said that the king of Bhutan basically was talking about this notion of gross national happiness, and I thought he was talking the biggest load of nonsense at the time. Okay, but I think with these reports coming out in the current one, I think I'm convinced, and it's something that we can basically kind of, in our surveys, maybe ask some of those sorts of questions that have been asked, and that might be able to help you with your data collection.
Well, for me, context matters. And I'm happy that we are launching this report this year in Africa. I don't think the African context has been really taken into account, which is a challenge to the universities, UJ. If you can just take the report and then adapt it and infuse the African context. And yeah, I mean, institutions like ECA will be there to sort of support. And the future, yes, well-being is important, and I see us investing more in it, especially when we see how depressed young people, well, I shouldn't say young people, how depressed people are, desperation. We need to invest in well-being and happiness.
Wonderful. What a fantastic panel. I would like to ask for a round of applause for our panelists, please. That's fantastic. I think you have highlighted how essential it is to work and develop and expand our perspectives in understanding our humanity and how we capture our well-being. We have for way too long over-relied on perhaps quite narrow measurements of understanding our well-being, and this is a fantastic example of how it can be done and how it can be used. So thank you so much for your insights, and I would like to hand over with this to Professor Aita. Thank you. Oh, please, the panelists, please stay
here. Thank you very much. I observe all protocols, and I think I was given this simple task to just close, and I think the reason why they did it is because they were worried that I was going to talk quite a lot due to excitement because it's the first time that this World Happiness Report, it is the first time that is being launched on the African continent, and specifically at the University of Johannesburg. And I must say that in all the presentations and the panel discussions, and you see, I was even told to use notes, to have notes so that I don't speak for a long time. I think we have learned from the first presentation, caring and sharing, and we also learn about the factors that determine happiness. I think some of the factors, among others, that can be cited, we have seen unemployment, trust in government, inequality, supporting others, sharing a meal. And I think specifically there was a presentation on the African continent delivered by our own Talita Grilling, that sharing and caring, and we were also able to see those countries that are at the top in Africa, and also those that are at the bottom. And we were also able to see, we have learned quite a lot, Ubuntu. And I think one of the things that we have learned from the panel discussion is that well-being and happiness goes beyond money. I think there was also a discussion on why do we need to be concerned about happiness instead of just looking at GDP. That, I think the discussion came out very well. And I think there was also an emphasis on SDGs, and that we need data in order to be able to do this modeling and analysis. And I think I was also told that I should actually not forget to say something about the School of Economics, where we consider ourselves or our vision to be the epicenter of critical intellectual inquiry in economic modeling and analysis, where we shape the future of economic modeling on the African continent. And this is achieved through our degrees, our bachelor's degrees, several specialized masters and PhD degrees that we offer. And more importantly, through the acquisition and retention of some of the best talents on the planet. We have them here. And I think one of the things, why am I saying this? I must say that we are a university that cares about our reputation. And as a School of Economics, normally when our reputation is reflected in rankings, we were celebrating when we see, among others, your Times Higher Education, where they say #1 in Africa. We celebrated, but we did not forget that we do not live for ranking. Whatever we do in terms of teaching and research, we want to make societal impact. And it is an event like this, launching of the World Happiness Report for the first time on the African continent, enable us to do our teaching and activities, research activities that have societal impact. That is what we stand for. And we are happy to be associated with the World Happiness Report. And I think you have had from the panel discussion, from our own Talita, that the next step from the University of Johannesburg, there will be a center specifically concentrating on happiness and well-being. And that is an important step for the University of Johannesburg. And I think what I need to say is that to put an event like this, a big event like this, big and important, it takes effort and contributions of several individuals and institutions. And I would like to acknowledge the financial support, colleagues from the World Happiness Report, the financial contribution that made it possible to have this event, a very nice event. Now that we're happy. Are we still happy? Okay. And I think I also would like to thank from the top leadership of the university, Dr. Arepa Tampoti, for the opening remarks on behalf of the university and for your encouragement. Our Dean, Professor Molloy, thank you very much for putting everything aside, specifically for this event. And of course, our presenter, Professor Halliwell, online from the University of British Columbia, and our panelists, okay, or starting with the moderator, Professor Erica Martin Berger, who is also our visiting professor here in the School of Economics, and of course our own Talita Railing. Okay, Professor Martin Berger, you are also one of us because you are visiting professor, and Sedati from the Gauteng City region, and of course Zodwa Mabusa from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. We really thank you for putting effort in this discussion. And in addition to that, there are people that we normally don't see them presenting, but they are behind the scenes to make sure that the event becomes successful. Ronel, I know you also put aside everything to just ensure that the event become successful. And of course, we also have in absentia the twins. We have twins in the School of Economics, Yolandi Broch and Karabo Modibane, who make sure that all the logistic, they work together with Ronel to make everything possible. And of course, the representative from the industry, members of the college leadership, the College of Business and Economics at the Great University of Johannesburg, my colleagues from the School of Economics, thank you for the support. And I see that Ronel is looking at me because she thinks that I am probably delivering a long speech. I must say that there are, let me put it this way, finally, I would also like to inform you that there are some powers that are vested in me, and these powers allow me to say or to invite you to the informal network and discussions, and also to say, by the powers vested in me, I now declare that this event has come to an end, and I invite you to the informal network and discussion. Thank you very much.